Hello, everyone. How are we doing? We doing good? Nice. Okay, this is good stuff. Can I just have a quick show of hands? How many of you have seen me on the internet at some point? Okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, sweet. That's super fun. For those who haven't, all the people who put their hands up are super weird, so just like keep that in mind. This is going to be fun. How do I get my slides up? Who cares? They'll come up at some point. Basically, perfect. We're going to talk about two things. Part one is going to be my journey into entrepreneurship and 3 insights that helped me along the way. And then part two is going to be about how I stay, personally, hopefully it'll help you as well, how I stay infinitely productive and consistent as a creator and entrepreneur. Now, just for a little bit of context, we'll start with my journey into entrepreneurship, and I'm going to try and make this, it's hard to give advice, really. I mean, I'm a YouTuber, I make videos giving people advice, but really, I don't know anything. I've just found a few principles that I found really helpful to apply to my own life over the last few years, and I want to share those principles with you guys so that in case some of them are helpful, hopefully you can take something away and apply it to your life, and if not, then hopefully I haven't wasted the last 29 minutes of your time. Anyway, let's start with part one, my journey into entrepreneurship. Right now, I do this, thank you for the very kind introduction. I used to be a doctor, and then I disappointed my mum when I became a YouTuber, and now I've been doing YouTube for 6 years. The channel's now on like 3-point-something million subscribers, and we've got a whole team, and it's just become this ridiculously big thing that I could have never imagined, and now I get invited to cool places like this to give talks exactly like this one. But it all kind of started, I just love my mother. All kind of started when I was 18 and I started medical school at Cambridge University. And, this was great. Got all the grades, did the whole thing, and I was there at the age of 18 with my little glasses, with my little smile, being like, yes, life is going to be good. I am going to be a doctor. But there were a couple of insights or observations that I had in my journey through medical school that really set me on the path to entrepreneurship. The first one was that every doctor I spoke to either looked like this, or like this, or like this. Stock images for tired and stressed doctors. They were all super tired, they were all super stressed. They didn't really seem to be particularly enjoying their lives. And so one question that I started asking people, just kind of randomly, was, if you won the lottery, would you still do medicine for fun? And obviously this applies to medicine, but you can apply this to any career that you might be in. I've just been speaking right now to people in the corporate world, this kind of stuff. If you look at the people who are 5 years, 10 years ahead of you, how much are they enjoying their life? If it's medicine in the UK, the answer is broadly not very much. So I would ask every doctor that I met that I got to know a reasonable amount this question, if you won the lottery, would you still do medicine for fun? And essentially, I would get a 50-50 split. Half of the people would say, I would leave immediately. One guy even said, I would leave in the middle of the operation if I won the lottery. He wanted to be a football coach. He was like a professional obstetrician. He'd been working for 40 years. Anyway, all that aside, half of them would say I would leave immediately, and the other half would say, I would still do medicine, but I would go part-time. I don't know anyone who enjoys being a full-time doctor, working 80 hours a week, but I know a bunch of people who would enjoy it if they had to just work 2 or 3 days a week. And most of us here, if you have a real job, and you enjoy the job, it's pretty cool if you can just do it 2 or 3 days a week. It's sick. You can spend time with your family, you can do your hobbies, you can do your side hustle, whatever that looks like. Working part-time is actually a good path to a fulfilling life. But then I would follow up with, okay, well, what's stopping you from quitting, or what's stopping you from going part-time? And it would always be about money. They would have like a mortgage or a family or kids in private school and any of this kind of stuff, and they'd be like, well, I'm now shackled to this job because I need it to pay the bills, and I can't quit my job or go part-time because I need the money. I was like, all right, cool, fair enough. This basically made me realize that if I wanted to enjoy my life as a doctor, I would probably have to go part-time, and I'd probably need a way to generate income on the side. And since then, I've met loads of doctors who have income on the side and who work part-time in medicine, and they're loving their lives. Life is good. So this was kind of insight number one. Around the same time, I came across this story. This is the parable of the Mexican fisherman. Apologies if you've heard this before, but this is a story that had an enormous impact on my life when I first started medical school. Here's how the story goes, the parable of the Mexican fisherman. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked, why didn't he stay out longer and catch more fish? The Mexican said he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. The American then asked, but what do you do with the rest of your time? And the Mexican said, I sleep late, I fish a little, I play with my children, I take siestas with my wife, Maria, and I stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life, senor. The American scoffed. I have an MBA from Harvard and I can help you, he said. You should spend more time fishing and with the proceeds buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats and eventually you would have a fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening up your own cannery. You could control the product, processing, and distribution, he said. Of course, you would need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, then LA, and eventually to New York City, where you will run your expanding enterprise. The Mexican fisherman asked, but how long will all of this take? To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years or so. But what then? Asked the Mexican. The American laughed and said, that's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions. Millions, and then what? Asked the Mexican. Well, then you could retire. Move to a small coastal fishing village where you could sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, and stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play guitar with your amigos. Now, this story had a ridiculous impact on my life because it helped me realize for the first time, I kind of came across this when I was around 18 and starting university, that this default script that we follow in life, which is the I will keep on working my way up and then ... something will happen further down the line, this just seemed a bit of a scam, really. I didn't want to retire when I've got osteoarthritis in both of my knees, having worked super hard and then not being able to enjoy my retirement. That just seems a bit pointless. And this story really illustrated the importance of enjoying the journey and really questioning what is the point of the career that we're trying to have in the first place. Presumably, for a lot of us, the point is make money, have fun, help people, live a decent life. We're all trying to optimize for happiness and fulfillment. But is it really optimizing for happiness and fulfillment to kill yourself working in your 20s and 30s so that you can then retire at 60 and kind of do the same stuff you wanted to do when you were young? Possibly, probably not. I'm not really sure. But anyway, I read the story and I was like, okay, cool. A, I need to make money on the side because I need to enjoy my life as a part-time doctor. But B, ideally, I want to enjoy the whole process of getting there so that I'm not filled with regret when I'm looking back on my life. Maybe this was a bit much for me to think at 18, but I was like, hey, you know what, Gen Z, millennial, whatever that is, we want to have fulfillment in our careers. And around the same time, observation or insight number 3 came from this book, The 4-Hour Workweek, Escape the 9 to 5, Live Anywhere and Join the New Rich, by Tim Ferriss. This is the single book that has had by far the biggest impact on my life. I know Lewis Hose was here last year at this conference. This book changed his life as well. This book has been the single thing that has contributed more than anything else to the combined valuation of so many companies and businesses that have been started with people currently aged about 25 to 45-ish. This was an absolutely game-changing book because the 4-Hour Workweek was really all about this new model of living where you're not just sacrificing your youth for the promise of retirement at some point further down the line. You could actually, maybe if you live in a country other than expensive places like the UK, maybe you could have a lifestyle business where you're making money through your business, you're working remotely, you're working from your laptop, you're kind of doing it for a few hours each week, and maybe you get to a point where you can fund your lifestyle and focus on kind of your own personal happiness and fulfillment. This came out in 2006, 2007. Nowadays, it's pretty standard stuff. Everyone knows the whole remote work dream, all this kind of stuff. But when the 4-Hour Workweek came out, it was super pivotal in introducing people to this kind of lifestyle. And there was a phrase from the book, this idea of passive income, which loads of people now talk about on YouTube. But this phrase really lit a fire underneath me when I was in medical school. Because this is the dream. It's like, how do you make money without actually working for it? This is what everyone wants. This is what we all want, right? We want to make money without having to work for it. Realistically, there's actually no such thing as passive income, and you do have to work for it. But it was an idea. And so this idea lit the fire of entrepreneurship underneath me, and I realized that A, if I want to enjoy my life as a doctor, I probably would want to go part-time, if my colleagues are anything to go by. B, if I want to go part-time, I need to somehow make money on the side. And C, ideally, this money needs to be passive so that I'm not working ridiculously hard and burning myself out to make that money. And those things led me to this whole journey of entrepreneurship, which is broadly the journey of how to make money, which is broadly the journey of like, how do you service people in a way that they will gladly pay money for? And it's broadly 3 ways of doing it that I'm just going to blitz through. Number 1 is services. You could sell a service that people are going to pay for. Number 2 is products. You could create a product, a digital product, a physical product, whatever that might be, that people will pay for. And number 3 is attention. And this is sort of what YouTubers and influencers are doing. You're kind of selling attention, whether you're selling your own services or your own products, or someone else's services or products, or a sponsorship, anything like that. By building an audience of people that know, like, and trust you, you can supercharge your ability to make money and your ability to be an entrepreneur by being able to sell these different types of things, services and products. And so from about the age of 19, this was when I started selling services. So from 2013 to 2019, I had a business that was selling services, helping people get into med school. That was my first kind of dipping my toes into the world of entrepreneurship. We did like 10K in the first year, GBP 100K in the second year, plateaued at around 150 for the next several years. But, while I was in med school, I was making like 50K a year personally profit, and that was just as much as doctors were earning. And so it's like, purely by just getting started on this journey and doing the boring thing of selling services, I was able to make 50K a year while I was in university, and that funded my university experience and meant I didn't really have to think too hard about money. So that was awesome. And it was really boring. I've spoken to a bunch of people right now, people who want to quit their jobs, people who want to make money, and I kind of focused on the sexy stuff. I want to build a software business. I want to build a YouTube channel. But actually, the way you really make money from day one is by selling a boring service, by window cleaning, by babysitting, by private tutoring, whatever that looks like. That is one potential way to build a business. The graduation from that is products, and that's where you create an item. For me, it was software that helped people get into med school. Again, boring industry, but it was an industry I had experience. Built some software, learned how to code, various YouTube tutorials and books, never paid for any courses, anything like that, literally just learned how to code on YouTube, built some software, and started selling that, and that software was selling on autopilot. Now that was interesting, because that's real passive income. You've built the software once, and now you're making money from it, theoretically, while you sleep. And so that's still continuing to this day. But then, 2017 was when I decided to start my YouTube channel. And that was when I was like, hey, you know what, this is cool. Why don't I make videos on the internet teaching people how to get into med school? And then it just sort of evolved, and for the last 6 years, it's now become this ridiculous thing where I now get invited to places like this to give talks about productivity and stuff. Never thought any of this would happen, but it all started with those 3 insights while I was 18, starting out in med school. The idea of passive income, the idea of not wanting to be shackled to a job I didn't enjoy, and the idea of this Mexican fisherman parable of wanting to enjoy the journey rather than try and retire when I'm 60 and when I've got arthritis in both my knees. Now, if this was a talk all about entrepreneurship, we could go into all of these and how do you make money through services? How do you make money through products? How do you make money through attention? But it's not. I think what's potentially more interesting is a question that I've gotten most often than out of anything else, which is a question that loads of people even asked me while I was outside earlier today, which is that how do you do all of this stuff? Like, let's say you've got a full-time job and you know you want to start a business on the side. Let's say you're a full-time student and you know you want to start a YouTube channel or write a book or do something in the evenings. How do you actually do that while you have most of your day that is taken up with your main gig, your student or your full-time job or whatever? And the thing that everyone says is that the secret to all of this is consistency. How do you create a service that's compelling enough for people to pay for? Well, you show up consistently and you provide value. How do you create a product that people will pay for? You show up consistently, you provide value. How do you build an audience on the internet like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok? You show up consistently, day after day, week after week. You provide value for free in the hope that some point further down the line, people will start to follow you. But this consistency thing is actually kind of hard, especially while you have this full-time job. And so for the second part of this, I want to kind of focus on how I personally stay infinitely productive and consistent as a creator and entrepreneur. And essentially, there was one key moment where I realized this firsthand, and it was kind of weird. I hope you forgive me, I'm going to tell a kind of weird story. But it was like a Christmas day, I think it was like 2018. It was my first year working as a doctor. And has anyone heard of a manual evacuation procedure? Anyone know what that is? If someone has constipation, you have a patient with constipation, manual evacuation procedure is where you've already tried to give them laxatives through their mouth. And the nurses have already tried to put something up their bum to like soften their poo, but none of that has worked. And now what you need is a qualified doctor to put their finger inside the patient's rectum and scoop out poo from their bum, because that's going to relieve their constipation. First time in my life doing this procedure was Christmas Day 2018, my first year as a doctor. The nurse came into the ward first thing in the morning, and the nurses were like, "Hey, Ali, we've got to do a manual evacuation today." And I was like, "Okay, what's that?" And they were like, "Well, let me tell you what that is." And I said, "Okay, can one of the nurses do it?" Fingers crossed. They said, "No, the nurses can't do it. In the UK, nurses are not licensed to be able to do manual evacuation." And I was like, "Well, I've never done one before." And they were like, "Well, you're the doctor. You're going to figure it out." So I went on Google, typed in how to do manual evacuation, watched a YouTube video about it, classic, washed my hands many times, put on some gloves, got the lubricating jelly, did the whole shebang. I didn't manage to get the smell out of my nose by the end, until the end of the day. It was a weird experience, but patient was super happy, relieved their constipation. It's kind of weird for me, but hey, we're a doctor. This is what we signed up for. But the really weird thing was, for some reason, when I got home from the end of that day of work, I was remarkably energized. I had a lot of energy. Now, normally, when I would get home from the day of work, I would feel super drained and exhausted, and I wouldn't feel like I had the energy to do anything, make a YouTube video, do my whatever. But for some reason, this day, Christmas Day 2018, I was like, oh, damn, I've just got so much energy. Why did I have all this energy? I was like, am I a bit weird? Am I a bit weird that I got energy from doing this manual? Like, it didn't quite make sense. But then I kind of treated myself as a bit of a subject in an experiment. And I tried figuring out, okay, for the next few weeks, I'm going to see, are there any other days in which I feel ridiculously energized at the end of the day of work, rather than drained? And I found out. Turns out it wasn't manual evacuation. Weirdly, whenever I was working on a weekend, I would feel weirdly energized. And there's this thing in psychology called the weekend effect, which I found out about later, which is, most of us feel very energized on the weekend. On the weekend, we get to do what we want. We're not generally at work. But for some reason for me, when I was on call on a weekend, working in the hospital, I felt really, really, really energized at the end of the day, rather than drained. So what was it about the weekends that made me super, super, super energized? We're going to come to that. But I want to zoom out slightly and talk about kind of 3 different philosophies when it comes to productivity. Productivity, getting things done. Some people say it's all about efficiency. It's all about being able to just get through your to-do list really, really fast, and that's the secret. Kind of, but like, if you get through your to-do list a bit faster, just more piles on, and there's only so far you can take just being efficient with your to-do list. Some people say it's all about elimination. This is the school of philosophy of minimalism, that just get rid of everything on your plate and then focus on the most important things. But if, for example, you're working a job and you have a family and you have friends and you have a life, you don't want to just ignore your kids. You don't want to just not hang out with your friends. You don't want to eliminate things just so that you can do your side hustle. But the way that I've realized after this manual evacuation thing, after this realization about this weekend effect, is that actually it's all about energy. Because for most of us, time is not actually the limiting factor. If it is, if you're working 18 hours a day as a lawyer, you're kind of screwed. There's not much you can do about it. Like, literally, there are only 24 hours in the day. You literally cannot create more time. But even though we can't physically create more time, we can always create more energy. And this was the realization that I had after this weekend on call, after this manual evacuation, after kind of treating myself as an experiment in this thing, figuring out like what was it about certain days at work that made me feel really, really, really energized. And I basically boiled it down to 3 things. The 3 things that created energy were the 3 things I want to talk about in the rest of this, and I'm hoping if you just keep these 3 words in your mind, you can maybe apply this to whatever you're struggling with, and hopefully it will help you generate more energy out of the thing. The nice thing about generating energy from the thing is that if you can make your work feel like it's energizing, if you can make it like generate energy, you're just going to be more productive with your work anyway, because we all are more productive at things that we feel like generate energy. But also, you're going to end up with more energy left at the end of the day to focus on the things that you actually care about. You know, even outside of your work, your business, your passion, your side project, your friends, your family, like whatever that might be. And one of the interesting things that comes up, like now that I've been digging into the research in psychology and neuroscience about this kind of stuff, which is nice because now I get to kind of use my medical background for some good in the world, is that really energy is generated by positive emotions. Sounds kind of corny, maybe, but we've all had this experience. When you feel good, when you feel positive emotions towards your work or towards anything else in life, it's ridiculously energizing. When you feel negative emotions towards anything in life, it's super, super, super draining. When, like, let's say you're in a relationship and you're having good vibes and stuff with your spouse, super, super energizing, everyone is uplifted. When you're in a relationship and you've had an argument with your spouse and there's like negativity and negative emotions there, everyone feels drained, everyone feels stressed. And so really, the key here is, how do we generate positive emotions in our work so that A, we become more productive, but also that we generate energy, which makes it possible to do everything else. And so the most direct answer to the question that I always get from people that I've gotten outside, like, how did you have the time and energy to do all of this YouTube stuff while working full-time, is I found a way to make it generate positive emotions. I found a way to make it feel good, because whenever the thing that you're doing generates positive emotions, it becomes way, way, way more energizing. So what were those three things? I call them the three energizers. And the first one is power. Now this is the feeling of power. What is the feeling of power? Well, it's sort of a combination of choice, when you feel like you have a choice over the thing that you're doing, when you feel like you have autonomy. Capability, so when you feel like you're actually good at the thing, using your skills, feels very powerful. And confidence, when you feel like that glow of self-efficacy is what they call it in the scientific literature, that feeling of confidence at doing something makes you feel powerful. And when you feel powerful, you're just almost by default going to feel more energized. So how can you apply this? How do you apply this practically? What I realized is that on the weekends, when I was on call, weirdly, on those weekends, the only thing that was different was that there was fewer doctors around. There was less support. And so I had more work to do, but I felt more powerful. And the reason I felt more powerful was because I was taking more responsibility. I was taking more initiative. I was choosing to view the patients as being under my care rather than just following orders. On a normal weekday, I was like, oh, I'm just following orders, I'm just a junior doctor, I'm the bottom of the totem pole, I'm just going to do what I'm told. That kind of attitude is really, really, really like self-defeating and draining. But on the weekends, I was like, well, I'm the only one here, someone's got to do the job. The consultant's on chilling at home on, speed dial on my phone. I don't want to call them in unless it's a real emergency, so I'm going to try and do my best to do as much as I can. And in a weirdly counterintuitive way, the more I did for my patients on those weekend shifts, the more powerful and energized I felt. Which is why doing the manual evacuation felt so energizing, because I was able to do something very specific to relieve someone's pain, and that felt amazing. I realized also that a lot of this was kind of a mindset shift. I didn't need to wait until the weekend to choose to take more power in the work that I was doing. I could do that on the weekdays as well. And so after I had this realization, every day became an energizing day, because I realized the more I approach my work with this combination of choice, getting the feeling that I choose to be there rather than I have to be there, capability and confidence, where I was showing initiative, I was actually going the extra mile. Weirdly, going the extra mile for your patients or in your work makes you feel more energized. And the mistake that I see a lot of people make is like, oh, I hate my job. All right, cool, you hate your job. What are you doing about it? Well, I'm just going to do the bare minimum at work. So I'm going to watch the clock so I get home at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. and then I can do the thing I actually care about. But that is profoundly soul-destroying. No one likes looking at a clock. No one likes being like, oh, God, I've got my indentured labor for the next 7 hours, and then I'm allowed to go home and suddenly live my life. That's just profoundly draining and not very nice. And often what it takes is actually, weirdly, the more effort we put into our work, the more energy we can get out of it. And there was one very specific thing, mindset shift, that really worked for me. I remember there was one day where I was, it was the end of a 13-hour shift, and one of the nurses said, hey, Ali, can you put a cannula, like an IV line, in one of our patients? She was like, 7 weeks pregnant, suffering with morning sickness, like, really having a really bad time, like really dehydrated, and she needed a cannula to get fluids overnight. And it was the end of the shift, and I was like, oh, God damn it, like, fine. I guess I put the cannula in, got my stuff together, and, the story I was telling myself in my head is like, oh, why do I have to do this? This is really annoying. If I just managed to get out of work 30 seconds earlier, it would have been the doctor on call to put the cannula in, all this stuff. And then I heard the patient say to one of her relatives that, oh, it's such a pleasure being here in the NHS. The doctors are super nice, the nurses are super nice, and I've had a really good experience. And as I was sort of grumbling to myself, getting all my stuff together for this cannula, I heard her say this. I was like, hang on, what am I doing? I'm just shooting myself in the foot right now. Why am I grumbling about this? There was a blog post by Seth Godin, shout out Seth Godin, that I came across many years ago that came back to me in that moment, where he said basically, whenever you find yourself thinking, I have to do X, just change the thought process. You don't have to do X, you get to do X. Rather than have to, it's I get to. And so I realized in that moment that I was treating doing this cannula as, I have to put in the cannula. But actually, all I had to do was treat it as, I get to put in this cannula, and immediately, just in one split second, my entire attitude towards the thing changed, and I felt more power. When we think, I have to do X, it takes the autonomy and the control and the choice away from us. It feels really draining, really disempowering. When we feel, I get to do X, even if we're just convincing ourselves, even if it's not true, if we can just convince ourselves that I get to do it, or I choose to do it, or I'm blessed to do it, it makes an enormous difference to our mindset, and it makes an enormous difference to how much positive emotion we feel from the situation, how powerful we feel, and how energizing that thing feels. So, practical takeaway, next time you ever feel, I have to do something, remember that that feeling is draining your energy, it's causing you to be unproductive and stressed. Try and change it, if you can, in your mind to I get to, or I'm blessed to do the thing. You'll feel more power, and you will magically feel more energized, regardless of what you're doing. So that was power. Number 2 is play. These are the 3 energizers. Now, play is an interesting one. The thing that I realized is that on the days where I was approaching my work with the spirit of play, where I was taking a playful attitude towards it, those were the days where I got way more energy out of it. And there's a lot of specific tactics to go into here. As authors, you can track your word count, you can gamify things as much as you want. But there's one phrase from the British philosopher Alan Watts that I really like, and that's the idea of serious versus sincere. And the way that he talks about this is that no one likes playing a game with someone who's taking it too seriously. These are the people that are throwing a tantrum when you pass Mayfair or Park Lane in Monopoly and you're kind of billing them for their rent. It's not fun playing with someone who takes it too seriously. But it's very enjoyable playing a game with someone who plays sincerely. You want someone to be sincere rather than serious. You don't want them to throw the game and be like, oh, it's just a game, I'm not going to bother, because that's really boring. Who wants to play with that? You don't want them to take it too seriously either. And this kind of approach to our own lives as well. I found that for me, whenever I'm feeling drained or feeling stressed, usually it's because I've forgotten to approach the task in the spirit of play. I have lent into accidentally forgetting to play sincerely and taking it too seriously. I'm in the process of writing a book right now. Deadline is 2 weeks from now, and I'm just sort of feeling a bit stressed by this deadline. But I have a little post-it note on my computer monitor that says, remember to enjoy this journey. Remember to enjoy this journey. It sounds weird, sounds kind of corny, but I find that to be a ridiculously helpful reminder to myself that, hey, this is supposed to be fun. I can treat writing this book in the spirit of play. It does not need to be serious. I can just play the game sincerely. And there's a quote from Grey's Anatomy, which is the reason I actually studied medicine. In one of the early seasons, season 1 of Grey's Anatomy, the chief of neurosurgery, Derek Shepherd, the late Derek Shepherd, played by Patrick Dempsey, incredibly handsome guy, obviously. The chief of neurosurgery, he's starting an operation where he's about to slice into someone's brain, and he goes around and everyone introduces themselves. And what he says is, it's a beautiful day to save lives. Let's have some fun. It's a beautiful day to save lives. Let's have some fun. And again, whenever I feel that sense of drain, that sense of stress, I remind myself of that quote from Dr. Shepherd from Grey's Anatomy. Even in something as serious as neurosurgery, you can still approach it with an attitude of play. You can play sincerely rather than seriously. So that is also profoundly energizing. And then the final one is people. Power, play, and people. We've all had that experience. You hang out with certain people and they energize you, and you hang out with other people and they really drain your energy. The penthouse people versus the basement people. Generally, if you're struggling with productivity or with consistency, with almost anything, tapping into the energy of the people around you can give you that push that you need to become more energized by it. That's why people making friends at conferences like this is absolutely incredible. This is why if anyone's starting YouTube channels, I always encourage, like, try and find someone in your city who is also starting a YouTube channel so that you can be accountability buddies. You know, I was being interviewed on a podcast earlier today, and Shireen, the host, was talking about how she and her brother are accountability buddies for the gym. They go to the gym every day at 5:30 p.m. because just having someone else to tap into the energy of that person around you makes the thing feel way more energizing, makes you way more likely to do it. And so whether it's studying for your exams at university, doing it with friends makes it more energizing. If you're trying to start a side project, having co-working sessions with your friends in the evening where you all get together and work on this thing together makes it profoundly energizing. Even if you're doing a super boring ass project at work, like I often did with like trying to get publications and audits and stuff when I was working in medicine, just trying to get some colleagues around, put some music on, tap into the energy of the people around you. It makes the thing way more enjoyable and way more energizing, and also makes you way more productive. So power, play, and people. And the method for this a phrase I've started to think about a lot, which might actually become the title of my book that I'm working on, is feel-good productivity. Weirdly, the more we can try and feel good with our work, the more we generate positive emotions, the more that is going to generate energy, and that energy is what we need to stay productive and to stay consistent with whatever we're working on. So the final takeaway for this little talk, and the thing that I often think about, is what's the secret to productivity? What's the secret to consistency? Honestly, it's to find a way to make your work feel good. And how do you do that? The 3 Ps: power, play, and people. How do I feel more power in the situation? How do I approach the situation more in the spirit of play? And how can I tap into the energy of the people around me so that I can ultimately be more energized and be more productive? That's it. Thank you so much.